Hey guys, this is National Master Kevin Yang back at it with another video. So this analysis game is against our ChessGo member NiceChessD. So let's begin, of course. So this game basically ventured into a Noteboom variation, and it was I don't know, wasn't the best quality on my part, but let's see it. So after d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, c6. So initially, this is what is called on the black side a triangle setup. So notice there's a triangle. Notice there's also a pyramid. So think of it as like, if you want to call it a triangle, you want to call it a pyramid, go for it. So think of it as building this solid structure so that, you can keep your center heavily fortified. So let's say if you take this way, you can take this way, or you can take this way. It gives you flexibility. Knight f3, now I play d takes c4. Now, first of all, you might think, well, doesn't this sort of break your idea of keeping the fortified structure? And I'm like, yeah, it does. But this is a way to try to be a little bit greedy and keep the pawn. So after e4, now there are different moves here. There can be a4, there can be e3, there can play e4, but most of it goes to the same variation. So e4, b5. So I want to keep the pawn like I told you. a4, bishop b4. Now, you can see that after takes, knight cannot take because bishop pins knight. So a takes b5 now, c takes b5. So think about it like this. There are some other variations like bishop d2, right? Knight f6, attack this, but after e5, if I play, let's say, knight d5, a takes b5, bishop takes c3, b takes c3, c takes b5. Now, this is black still hangs on to this pawn. However, look at all these squares, right? So when I grab this pawn, I make a concession. I'm going to get the pawn, but I'm probably going to weaken a lot of squares. Now, will the gamble pay off sometimes? Yeah. If you finally get to trade everything down, you're going to be up a pawn. You're going to be really happy. However, if white learns that knight g5, knight e4, knight d6, if there's an idea, right, to try to penetrate my squares, then black is going to be a little bit, worried and dazzled and all of that. So it really comes with a sort of risk. So think about it like this. Another variation is, okay, bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and let's say the move knight e7, or you could play the move knight d7. After knight d7, usually, I believe queen b1 could be a move, yes. a6. Black tries to develop on the queen side and then gets the knight out and castles. That's the goal, but ultimately, white has the two bishops, and that does play a little bit of a role in why grabbing this pawn is not the greatest idea. Because first of all, white has much more control of the center. Black gets a pawn, but like the structure is a little bit, wonky. So it really depends how you look at it, but the Noteboom variation is very unique for that matter. A takes b5, c takes b5, bishop e2, and now I bring out the knight. Now this is working in my favor because first of all, I'm threatening the pawn. Knight takes e4 because it's pinned, right? So if it's pinned, this is going to be a free pawn because the knight cannot take this pawn. So after bishop g5, setting up a very good pin, Very good move. Bishop g5, h6, bishop takes f6, queen takes, castles, and now I take on c3. Notice now that my pawn is sort of, I'm like, okay, I have my pawn, castles, and you can see that in this position, these squares, well, white has to make the concession e5, knight d2, knight e4, knight d6, right? And although that's not a bad plan at all, e5, say queen e7, knight d2, bishop b7, now trying to cover this diagonal, say bishop f3, but now there's a6. And after knight e4, well, knight d7, knight d6, bishop takes, queen takes, and knight b6, knight d5. So after, let's say, queen c6, well, we're going to have to think about, okay, is the rook going to take a6, right? So after knight d5, rook takes a6, rook takes a6, queen takes a6, knight takes c3, knight takes b5, and now, okay, so there's a debate of opinion whether knight takes, queen takes, rook c8 is good, looks good, or knight e2, knight f4, and queen g5. Both options look great. I think, well, it's your choice there, but that's a possible plan, right? To get the knight over here to a very dominant square, bring the bishop out. I would consider it quite logical. So, queen c2, a6, rook fb1. Now, I played bishop d7. Now you might be thinking, why don't you play bishop b7, right? Well, guess what? These rooks are actually very powerful. So this rook keeps an eye on this bishop. In this position, white can play the move bishop takes c4. B takes c4, rook takes bishop. So, we want to prevent that, so I'm going to play bishop d7. No more bishop c4, because after b takes c4, right, there's going to be no bishop on b7. The bishop is on d7 now. Now, what this rook does, same thing, keeps an eye on this rook. So, with the move, so in this position, white is threatening rook takes b5. So let's think about it like this. Queen e7, rook takes b5, a takes b5, rook takes a, right? But in this position, it doesn't work because, so think about it. Well, okay, maybe if I played queen e7, there's this. Rook takes, a takes, rook takes, and after bishop a6, queen b7, the rook is trapped. Yeah, don't want to do that, so let me demonstrate my idea in a more... Okay, let's say queen g6. So after queen g6, rook takes b5, a takes b5, rook takes a, bishop b7, and oh, okay, looks like this is also good for black. So how about this? Queen d8. This is bound to be okay. Rook takes b5, a takes b5, rook takes a. You get the point now. Okay, maybe there's still bishop a6, but you get my point, right? There's the rook keeps an eye on the a8 rook, and there's always this rook takes b5 idea. So after rook fb1, I played bishop d7. Knight e5, now I played queen e7. Now you can see I'm ready to bring the knight out to c6 because this rook links this rook, and as long as they connect, we'll be fine. So after knight takes d7, now I constantly tell this idea that you should trade only when you believe it's beneficial. So what do I mean by that? I mean that in this position, you have to look at the caliber of the pieces and you say, okay, do I want to trade this knight with a bishop? In my opinion, no. But in the computer opinion, yes. So why do I say not to trade this? Right? Why do I advocate for a different move? The reason is because to me this bishop well, if you think about it, if you think far ahead about what this bishop can do, this bishop will venture here, play f6, maybe play knight c6, and get out this way. However, if you look at it on a short-term basis, you'll see that this bishop right now isn't doing much, right? Its main function is guarding a pawn, and that is a very defensive bishop. This is a very active knight, right? To me, it feels like it's doing something. So for example, you could play f4, you could play bishop f3, and you could swing the knight back around. I feel like this knight would be much more useful compared to this bishop. But you traded, and after f4, knight b6, bishop f3, preparing the sniper on a8, knight a4, I'm setting up an outpost. I'm saying, you know what, I don't want to have any more pressure anymore. I want to place my knight there. So after rook e1, rook d8, g3, and now I have to come up with a plan, right? For one, pushing this is impossible because first of all, those rooks are heavily ready to defend that. So I have to think of another way to do it. Now, what is my plan? My plan is f6, e5, and after he provokes this, I'm going to bring my knight back to c5 and d3. Look for a better outpost, right? There's got to be a better square than a4. So what you do is you go in your mind and you say, where do I want to put these guys, right? So ideally, this rook wants to be on the other side. This rook wants to be on the other side, right? That's the ideal factor. So we got to make that happen. Number one, after king g2, I start playing f6. And at this point, my plan is e5, like after rook 81, e5, d5, and I bring my knight to c5, bringing it into d3, so that's my goal, right? So knowing my plan, white has to play e5 here. This pawn has to stay put, and after f5, well, I'm going to shift my plan a little bit. King h8, rook g8, g5, and start attacking on this side. Now notice that the white evaluation bar has turned to near equal. Why is that? Because technically I'm a pawn up, but that doesn't mean much because I can't really break through, right? So that's why the engine evaluation says that we're about equal. So in this part, it's all about the planning that's going to make it work. So king h8, rook g8, g5, and start pushing through on this side. That's going to be my goal. So that didn't happen. Instead, I got e5 in, and after d5, I got my plan in. Really helped with opening up the line a little bit with the fork as well. Queen e3, and slowly I was able to maneuver my way with the open rooks, very strong, and with the help of time pressure on NiceChessD's side, I was able to win a rook and the game. So, what do I think was the main reason why I won? Really, I mean, the opening was all somewhat standard. I mean, there wasn't too much big mistakes in the opening. Just, I guess, taking d7 felt like a small concession that was not needed. And otherwise, I think allowing the knight to d3 gave me the win. So it was sort of like one move gave me the push to victory. And so, thank you for listening, and I hope to see you next time.